So we're going into our next phase of the show, which is our book club kickback with author Alyssa Cole. And she is a best-selling author. She's really set the world on fire with her first book. And she's been really putting out a whole bunch of books ever since. Her first book was When No One Is Watching. So, and she's joining us from somewhere in the world. And she said it was 3 a.m. So I don't know
Okay.
where she, God bless you. And Alyssa, you look so fresh, like you just woke up.
Yeah, that's this light over here. So I'm
Well,
not
where
gonna
are
get too
you?
close to the screen.
Well, can you tell us where you are?
I'm in France.
Yay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
part? Are you in Paris or a
No,
different?
I'm in Dijon. So it's
Okay.
we're mustard. We're the mustard. It's
Well, the
from
mustard.
Oh, I must say there are much better cities than Paris. So I'm glad to know that you're not in Paris. And I'm sure that the city where you are, I've not been to Dijon. I've been to quite a few cities in France, but I don't believe I've been to that city, but I'm sure it's beautiful.
It is. It's a small city. It's nice. I think people are much nicer than they are in Paris. So,
Yeah.
Paris has its charms, but it's a bigger city. So
Now, do you live in France full time?
I
Oh,
I
okay.
did. Well,
Oh,
I just moved here less than a year ago. Before that, I was living in the French Caribbean.
Ooh.
okay.
So
Okay. All right. Now, where are you from, like originally? Where were you? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in the Bronx and lived there for part of my childhood, and then we moved to Jersey City. So New York, New Jersey, and then like as an adult, I moved to Brooklyn, and then I lived there until I moved to Martinique in the French Caribbean. So I grew up in New York and in New Jersey.
So did
Okay.
you just have a thirst for travel and experiencing other cultures, or was it work that took you to these different countries?
I did love traveling, but I ended up getting married to a French man, so then that's why I ended up living here. But before that, I did love traveling and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
some people who follow me know that I lived in Belgium for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I got to visit so many different countries in France. And I like the smaller, lesser known cities way better than the popular cities. I mean, they have character, they have a different culture. Just I loved everything about them. So sometimes we would just jump in the car and drive to a different country because it was easy to do. You could be there in less than a couple, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But that was what I love. So you just bringing back memories just talking with you right now.
Well,
And
we have.
Belgium,
Well, I wanted to acknowledge we have a couple of book clubs on the show, so I wanted to have them just mention their book club and where they're located, and we probably will have some more sign in as the show goes on. But Dondi, do you want to go first?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dondi. I am in Northern California, and I have a virtual book club, and we are right now called A Sip, a Shout Out, in a Sentence, and all of the members are actually women writers. And
nice.
so Gwen was actually one of our first book club writers who actually came in to talk to us a few months ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice to
Yeah, I
meet you.
enjoy the conversation. Yeah, I'm both Rhonda and I are authors. So I had
Mhm.
a recent book, my newest book. I'm still meeting with book clubs and did one yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I enjoy that. So then Melinda, which where are you located and which book club are you with?
Hi, I'm with the At the Kitchen Table Book Club, and we're located in Georgia and Florida. We have members in Georgia and Florida.
Yes.
Okay. And
Nice to meet you.
Dondi, you changed the name of your book club. You were Hush Harbor.
We were Hush
Okay.
Harbor, and that was
Okay.
over the pandemic when we were focusing mainly on copy left, so things that the copyright had already dropped because most of the members were elderly and
Mm.
don't have a lot of extra money to buy a lot of books. And then, with the pandemic ending, that died a slow death, and a few people were just adamant you need to bring the book club back. So I did, and now we purchase books,
Okay.
and that is a good thing because we get authors like Gwen and Rhonda, and maybe you, Alyssa, to come and talk to us. But it's also a bad thing because people will do things like go to the library and stuff like that. But I'm a big about buying the book because I like to abuse my books, write in them, and have little notes and everything else. And how does she do this? When did she foreshadow this? I need to go back and look. So I'm a book abuser.
Well,
I
I
get
know
No,
my
I
I
understand
read
book
any of
abusers.
my books.
I like the fact that you admit that you're a book abuser.
Yes.
I remember the first time I went to a book club meeting, and the members came in with rubber bands around their books because they wanted to
Yeah.
try to keep it straight. They would read their books like this, barely cracked, because they didn't want to mess up the spine.
No,
They were very serious about preserving their books.
no, see, Gwen sent me a signed copy. That's on the bookshelf. And then I buy the one that I want to abuse. See, that's
Oh, okay. So you
Okay,
double
got
up.
it.
You double
yeah,
up.
I double up. And then, like, if it's a book I really like, I'll buy three because I'll buy one for one of my siblings. So, because they'll steal books, and I don't want them to steal the one that's in the bookshelf.
Yeah.
And my brothers, those are the ones they always steal because they know they're signed, and
Right.
they'll claim them. No, this was mine. No, it says Donnie. It doesn't say her. So
So, Alyssa, do you meet with book clubs often?
I do, not very often, usually because of time
The
difference
time difference.
stuff, but I do, and it's always fun getting to talk to people about the book and how they hearing people's actual reaction to reading it after spending so long writing it and hoping that people will enjoy it.
Yeah, in fact, I reached out to you directly and I appreciate you responding because a lot of times when you go through the publishers and the gatekeepers, they don't respond or they don't respond in a timely manner. They've gotten better. I think because our show has gotten so much traction, we have a solid base of viewers and we can prove our numbers and all that, then we're able to get most 80% of the time, we're able to get the people that we ask for. Sometimes we can't. And sometimes we could, but because our show is live and it's at night and our time is 7 to 9 or 8 to 10 on the East Coast, for some people, it's too late. Even the 7 o'clock, well, 8 o'clock is too late for them. Or they want something taped. I've had people say, more than two people, they want to tape the show in the daytime or something. But I told them we never tape. Everything's live. It's always live. And that's just what we do. And when it's live, anything can happen, which makes it interesting.
Yes, the element of surprise
Yeah,
is
there's an
always
element
fun.
of surprise. So you write a lot of different stuff, Alyssa. You're in like 15 different genres. How how are you able to compartmentalize that keep it in order? How do you decide I'm gonna jump on this one, I'm gonna go historical this month or whatever, then I'm gonna go romance, then I'm gonna do a thriller. How do you balance all of
Um, so I think basically when I first started writing, I didn't really think about genre. And like as a kid, I was usually reading stuff from my parents' bookcase that I was stealing. So like Dondi's siblings. So I was usually taking whatever they had, and there would be science fiction or horror or the things that were at my school library with the kids books and stuff that were for younger readers. So I didn't really grow up like with the firm understanding of like that there was a strong line between genres just because I was like I just want to read what I want to read. And then my main thing as a kid was like why are there not more characters that look like me and my family and my friends? So when I started writing, I think that my writing, the ideas that I get for stories kind of reflects that. It's kind of like whatever kind of idea jumps out at me. And I did focus on romance at the beginning, and most of my stories, no matter what I write, will have romance in them. But then within that, they can be science fiction elements or historical fiction or contemporary fiction. So I just kind of, especially more so now that I've started like officially writing thrillers, because I had some like romantic suspense and some historical fiction that was like spy fiction. So it was like kind of domestic suspense in a way, but it was more marketed more for the romance and historical aspect. And now that I'm like officially writing thrillers, I can more make a conscious decision when I have an idea of like, okay, what kind of for this story, what genre would work best? Like for When No One Is Watching, which was like my first
Mhm.
my debut thriller. There's a strong romantic element, but the topic is gentrification, which I had like covered a little bit in a contemporary romance, a contemporary royalty romance. But then I realized as I was writing it that I couldn't really delve into the topic as much because it was more upbeat and more focused on things like a secret duke and stuff like that. So I couldn't really get into the gentrification and stuff as much as I thought I would. And then I realized that a thriller would be the better vehicle for the better genre for like really diving into that. And I could still have the romance element, but was able to like be a bit go a bit darker than I would for a contemporary romance.
So do you write full time?
I did.
You do? Okay. I thought so with the number of titles that you released.
Although I will say that most of the books were written, I've written, I feel like less since I started writing full time because before I was an editor for a scientific journal and I was
Oh,
writing full time, I was working full time and then accidentally writing full time because then I had all these deadlines. Um, so since I worked until like the end of 2017, basically, but I was working before remote stuff got popular. I was
okay.
working remotely, but it wasn't really working with the island internet, so I had to stop. So it's like, okay, I have to transition to being a writer full time and I have to make it work because I don't know, I can't speak French well enough to get a real job. So it was So it was like, all right, I got to make this work. And luckily, and it was also good for me because, editors don't make that much money. So I was like, all right, I don't have like that high of a baseline to reach. I just gotta, it's still hard, if you're a writer, But I was luckily able to make the transition.
Well, that's good. And being an author, do you find yourself first of all, being an author overseas, in Europe, do you find yourself having kind of weird hours, so to speak? Or do you seem like you get a lot of things done in the middle of the night because the United States is up in the middle of the night?
So when I was in Martinique, I was actually lucky because I was on the same time zone for the most part as the US. And then now that I moved here, it's been interesting trying to figure out what my hours are. Like sometimes, like you said, like before I was trying to keep like normal hours, but then sometimes it starts to drift more um towards later or the middle of the night, depending which before a long time ago when I lived by myself, I used to work more because I was working after work. So I would
Mm.
end up working like at night and in the middle of the night. So like now I'm trying to refine the best time for my brain to work because it isn't in the morning. It's not like 9 in the morning. Even when I was working full time, I would be like, okay, I'm not really getting anything done until later in the day anyway. So yeah, it has been interesting trying to make the adjustment and like figure out times that overlap. Um, with you know, working time as an author, but also like, co-working with my writer friends when we do a Zoom to work together, stuff like that.
Now, I did want to jump back a little bit because something that you said struck me. You said that you were reading all types of books as a young girl, and then you noticed that the characters did not look like you. How old do you think you were, or how long had you been reading before you realized that the characters didn't look like you? Because I'm kind of like you, where I was doing a lot of reading as a young girl, but I didn't really think about the fact that the characters that I was reading were white. I don't even think that really hit me until I was a little bit older. Like, hey, there aren't any black kids in these books that I'm reading. And so I'm
Yeah,
just wondering when that realization struck you.
I think part of it was, and I actually have the book here. Hold on, I'm gonna get it. So this is a book that I took when I was visiting my childhood home when my parents were moving. So there were
Oh,
these,
Rumpelstiltskin?
yeah, it was these fairy tales um, that I got, I think I was around 8, and there was fairy tales, but with black, retold with black characters, and the characters had like black names, and the stories were essentially the same, but the art had like black princesses and stuff like that, which is
Mhm.
probably why I have a contemporary royalty series. I'm sure it was influenced by reading that. So I think it was partially because I had this example of because there's a whole series of these books that I really loved that have black characters. And then I was like, wait, let me find some more books like that. And I realized that there weren't any, there really weren't many other books. And at that time, this was the late 80s and early 90s. Can you hold them for one second? I'm sorry, the cat opened the door in case.
Oh, that book that she showed, we had that book and that series of books when we had our bookstore, our brick and mortar
The
store.
cat has
We
decided
had,
to start causing chaos in the middle of the night. But so
yeah,
I
we
think
had that book in our bookstore, that and those books. I used to have a brick and mortar bookstore from 2000 to 2010. And we had that book in there in the series of books that were a play off of your typical Mother Goose or fairy
yeah,
tales, but they had all black characters in it. And I forgot the name of the author. Is it on there?
it's Fred Crump Jr. And it's actually funny
Yes, Fred
because
Crump.
I
Yes.
looked it up
Yeah.
as an adult. Like before I started writing my books, I went and looked it up, and he was actually a white man. He was an art teacher, I think, in Detroit, but he was an art teacher in a predominantly black school. And his like students would always say, why don't the characters in books look like us? And so he decided to start to make this series. I fully, until I was an adult, thought that it was a black man who made
Yeah, and
these
I
books.
assumed it was because I never met him, but I just assumed that it was. So you give me so we had those books and they sold very well.
Yeah, so I think that was a big influence. And then once I realized it, so I used to like read books and talking about like destroying books or like even short stories that because they used to have them in the tabloids or in magazines, and I would edit the stories. I would take my little whiteout and white out the character description and change it so that the characters have, brown skin and brown eyes and brown hair or black hair. Because at a certain point I just started getting aggravated. I was like, why, why? Of course, and I can imagine it while I'm writing. We all do that. We sometimes change the race of the character when everyone you were reading was a white character to like when you're imagining it in your head to look more like you. But
Right.
I think at a certain point I was just like, this doesn't make any sense because I'm reading, my parents were reading, my friends were reading. Why do none of the characters look like us? And I think that was I always loved writing and or telling stories. So I think eventually that was part of I used to mostly write for myself because I wanted to read characters that look like me.
So, when you kind of made your debut and you became your profile was elevated, let me say that, with your debut thriller, and you would started getting all these awards and accolades. How did how were you feeling during that time? Like how was that? How were you managing the attention you were getting with continuing to write?
Um, it was a little big. That was one good thing about not being in the US was that I kind of like I wasn't able to go to all of these events. I wasn't able, there was the downside, like I wasn't able to do as much promotional work. And it was also during the pandemic, when No One Is Watching came out in September of 2020, I think.
Okay.
So, one thing is that I don't really process stuff like that to begin with. So, like when, I don't know how to describe it. Because I started writing for myself, I didn't particularly have any goals as a writer, which sounds so like obviously I wanted people to read my books and I wanted to be able, once I made it into a profession, I wanted to be able to support myself. But a good part, it's a double-edged sword though, of like because writing is something that I have always done, whether with no expectation of like any reward for it because it's just something I need to do. That on the one hand, um, I wasn't expecting any accolades. Like I didn't have it as a priority for me of like, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's mostly just like I need to pay my bills is the main priority if I'm going to do this as a full-time profession, but I'm going to be doing it anyway. But then actually, getting the praise and the getting more readers and having more people talking about my books. Um, I think a lot of the time, like I pay attention to it in the sense of like I appreciate people reading my books and I try to interact with them and try to let them know that I appreciate it when I can. But I also uh, a good thing I think is that I try not to like let it influence me. But at the same time, I'm a
Mm.
human. So even if I'm not consciously thinking about it, it was still influencing me. And I felt like there was still a bit of more pressure than there was before. So the second thriller, for many reasons, one of them was burnout because I had written so many books before and then I burnt out. And then I had this like successful book and then I was expected to have the follow-up really quickly in addition to several other books that I was supposed to write. And at a certain point, and then it was
It
like
was
during the
on that.
pandemic and
Mm.
my brain and my body were like, we're not doing that. Like you are gonna take so it took like a long the book One of Us Knows was probably took me the longest time to write. And it was like technically difficult, but it wasn't like writer's block. It was more like um being overly focused on the book being like perfect. So that is part of why it took longer. And like I wasn't really thinking about it, but part of it obviously was like, okay, I can't mess up. But it was like kind of this thing that had built up because when I started in romance, there's a long history of Black romance writers, but there was also like this new, I feel like publishing kind of has these cycles where they pretend that diversity, which I hate that word, is something new, and they're like promoting it like Black people exist. That's like as if people didn't know that before. So it was this period of like publishers kind of acting like if your book failed, then you were messing it up for every other Black person that wanted to publish a book. So I had like this long period of like writing a lot of books, but also putting a lot of pressure on myself. Like, okay, you have to make sure that this book is like um not perfect. Obviously, you can't write a perfect book, but like there was the additional pressure that I think most white writers will never even have to think about. It's like if my book fails, it will be used in the marketing meeting to say, okay, we can't take this other person's book because this one Black person failed. So I think that was more pressure than any success. Like the success added to it a little bit because it was like, okay, is the next book going to fail now? Is the next book going to fail now? And like, but I think getting one thing I was happy about was being able to um, write book write a book about gentrification and about socially relevant issues that was still appreciated for being like exciting and interesting and getting a lot of people to think about those aspects. And, supposedly having publishers realize that you can write, a marketable, successful book about these kinds of things. But, publishing's going to do what it's going to do. So who knows? But
I'm glad that you touched on that because there are so many authors who dream of making it, so to speak. They want to hit these New York Times bestseller lists. They want to be mentioned with the greats, but I don't think everybody appreciates the amount of pressure that goes along with that. If you hit it big, so to speak, with that one book, they're expecting you to follow it up with the next best thing. And so that
yeah,
can be a lot of pressure on you when you're starting to write. And I think often that's where the writer's block will set in, or almost freezing, like, okay, what do I write next? Because you're trying to figure out, is this going to resonate the way the last book did?
yeah,
And that's a lot of pressure. What you described is so indicative of so many different institutions. But because white professionals, writers slash whatever, they are allowed to fail individually or succeed individually.
Right. But when
But
it's a collective.
it's a
yeah,
collective, it's everybody. And I mean, it's such an unfair measure of work, and it's too much pressure. And it was really well depicted in American fiction. I don't know if you've seen that yet. I
oh, I
recently
haven't seen it yet. I haven't.
Oh, it's you should, I think every Black writer should see it just because it shows how the absurdity
Yeah, I think
of of the
one of the
industry.
reasons I haven't seen it yet, I was like, I need to be in the right
Oh,
headspace. It's probably gonna
I've done that before. I put off watching a movie because I thought I needed to be in the right headspace. But this one, I didn't care what headspace I was in. I was going to watch that movie. It was a good movie.
yeah, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I didn't know that I would. I didn't really understand exactly what it was about, but it's about what you've described, the idea that we aren't able to succeed or fail in publishing, but you can use the same measure in other industries. But in the book industry, the decision making is so white that when Black people write, and I've heard authors tell me this, and they depicted it well in the movie, that the industry will tell them their book is not Black enough. The characters aren't Black enough, but there's white people telling them their characters are not Black enough. It is so absurd but the absurdity is well depicted in American fiction. So,
Yeah,
It's
I do
really
want to
what.
see it.
Oh
One
yeah.
thing I was,
Go ahead.
oh, no, I was
It's really
gonna,
worth watching.
I was just gonna say one thing that I've been pretty lucky about is I've never had an editor who tried to tell me anything about race in my books.
That's good.
Well,
My
that's good.
one of my first editors was a Black woman, Essie Soga, who was at Kensington and now she's at Berkeley. And my other editor who I worked with for the longest time was Erica Sang, who is Asian American and who never had any kind of commentary about like blackness in my books or anything like that, either, positive or negative, not like take this out or add this in, or I've been lucky that I haven't had those kinds of like editing relationships with any editors where they try to like control the content in that way. But I do think, and I'm sure probably for a lot of people who were picked up in 2020, there was probably some element of editorial over interest in like the blackness levels
Right,
of their books. And I
right.
think now I think there's also kind of like a weird backlash going on a little.
Yeah,
I won't call it a backlash, but it's a backlash. Like
yeah.
one of the things that I've been talking about with a couple of my friends is like now that there's this DEI backlash. DEI is just another word for woke. It's just another word for Black people, and other people of color, but primarily Black people. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out in publishing. I have seen some cases of it seems like publishers are trying to like stay away from controversial topics. But if you think that being a Black person is a controversial topic, then how does that affect what authors you're picking up, how much you're paying them? Sorry, my cat is like trying to
I have
be
a cat,
annoying.
so I get it. We're a cat house here.
Once he sees I'm on
We're a
Zoom,
cat
he's like, all
family. I need
right.
to say it like that. So I understand cats. They'll wait till you're busy and to get your attention. My cat he'll walk across my keyboard. I mean, really do. But they're like children in a way. They if they want your attention, they figure out how to get it. So
He is literally like standing on my monitor right now. Like, okay, I'm just gonna ignore him. But yeah, so I do think it will be interesting, and I've been trying to keep an eye on because of course certain books are getting, I won't say they're getting more publicity from publishers because I don't know if publishers really are doing all of that, but um I think people, it might seem, obviously there are more books being published now, but seeing what comes out in the next couple of years to see what they're actually my God, okay. Uh, to see what they're
well, we
actually
can. At least his
acquiring.
tail's not wagging in front of the camera.
He's just trying to knock down something. I don't know what he's doing. Um, but yeah.
But you're all right. The next couple of years, because they are, I noticed this uptick in. Well, we interview the people on this show. There's a lot more books coming out than there were when we started the show
Yeah.
4 years ago. There's in particularly certain genres. Historical fiction is one, and then fantasy and
Oh
thrillers
yeah.
too. But those areas, there are a lot of books being released. But one thing we have to continue to support the authors and support their work, because if there's any kind of dip, like you were saying, then a lot of times they'll just say, well, this isn't working anymore, and they'll move on. It's kind of
Right.
like,
Yep.
um, so we have to continue to support the authors. And then there's a lot of people self-publishing, and we can continue to support them too, because,
Mhm.
that's a way that they can do things without the middleman, so to speak. And So that's another area. So uh, we want to let people know about the new book and what that about one of us knows. And the focus of this book is um it's called DIO. No, DID.
It,
Dissociative identity disorder. I like your shirt.
yeah, thank you. It's from Philadelphia Printworks is the company, I think.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Because it's making a statement, and just everybody knows what that means. It's but it's not like in your face, but it is in it's like subtle. So, what made you? Well, you have your copy of the book. I have my copy, but then it's in another room. I meant to bring it in here. One of us knows, and I think it's is it in hardcover and paperback? Did it get
It is
really?
in hardcover. I didn't pick up a hardcover when I was in the US, but I need to get a copy because it's my first one that's in hardcover too.
Oh,
But
okay.
so one of us knows it's about a dissociative identity disorder system, and dissociative identity disorder used to be known as multiple personality disorder.
Mhm.
And I decided to write about it because um, one of the reasons is because usually if it shows up in a thriller, it's at the end of the thriller when they realize that the character, like a lot of the bad stuff being done was being done by one of the personalities. So it's usually like the surprise ending and
Okay.
placing it in, a bad light of like, if you have this disorder, then one of them has to be bad, crazy, violent, a killer, and dangerous. So I kind of want, and that, the characters won't know what's going on. So I wanted to play around with the idea of a multiple POV thriller where each character knows something. But you have to put it all together as you move through the story to figure out what's going on. But they're all in the same body. They all are have the same brain technically, but they are not the same person. And so they are not all the information isn't available to them. And the main protagonist, Ken, is the character who in another thriller or movie would be the bad guy, would be, the dangerous one. And she is aware of this. She has been dormant for 6 years because she just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. She's tired of always feeling like the bad guy. And at the beginning of the story, she basically wakes up. She's been dormant for 6 years. She has basically slept through COVID, and like COVID is still ongoing in the book. She slept through Trump, and she basically wakes up. They have this new job, and she has no idea what's going on. She doesn't want to be there, but is kind of forced into this situation because she's the only one who can each in this disorder, often if the people are aware that they have it and they've started to like figure things out, there are some members of the system who can front, which is being in control of the body, handling the everyday things. There are some who can do it for longer periods of time. There are some who can never do it. There are some who can only do it for a few minutes. And basically, she is the only one at the point that we meet her in the book who confront for a long period of time. So she is forced to, she has no choice about whether she's going to be caught up in everything going on. And I chose that because I thought it would just be a really fun and kind of challenging way to do a mystery and a thriller and have all of these different elements. And these people who have to work together, they really have no choice. If they don't work together and figure out what's going on, then like uh they're not going to survive.
Well, challenge is the word I was going to use because it sounds like it was a challenge. Keeping your characters straight, keeping the storyline straight because you're coming at so many different points of view. What was one way that you were able to just keep all of your characters aligned, so to speak?
Um, some of it was planning, a lot of it was trial and error. it was, I planned it out and I was like, okay, so there are at least 6 points of view in the story. Ken's is the primary, and then the main secondary is Solomon, who is kind of like her better half, also kind of her ex-boyfriend. It's complicated. And, basically I had ideas of how I wanted everyone to be and how the story would go because this character does this character serves this purpose. And then as I was writing the characters, that would change. It would be like, okay, no, actually this doesn't really work. This character is more like originally I had Solomon. Solomon is like kind of uptight, but I had him being like way more uptight at the beginning. I was like, no, this doesn't really work for him. Because he's also one of her love interests, and he needed to be a little more approachable, so that changed him. And then like other characters thinking about how they were, so I would have to change each character, but every time I would like figure out who the character was and how they interacted, in the main storyline, but also with each other uh headmate in the system, that would then change the story a bit because it would change how they're going to react to everything as it went on. And as I was learning more about dissociative identity disorder, kind of playing around with things, one of the reasons it was hard to write is that there were so many variables, like with each character and then each possibility. And when I started writing it, and until basically very close to the end, I didn't know who the one of us who knew was because there were like I had a few different possibilities that each of them could have been a viable ending and an ending that I think would have been good, but I had to figure out which one was the best one for the story that I was trying to tell.
Did you have to do a lot of research about the disorder
I
in
did.
writing the book?
I did a lot of research about the disorder, which I find just fascinating what human brains can do. And there are some people who don't think it exists. They think anyone who has it is faking it, and that it's just done for attention. But I don't think so. And I actually had an accuracy reader who is someone, who is part of a dissociative identity disorder system who, was able to give me feedback for my ideas and kind of give me an overall, because there are so few books about this, like books and movies and stuff about dissociative identity disorder, that I wanted to make sure that the representation was good and that nothing in the book would be harmful because people would be likely to read it. And I wanted to make sure that there was nothing harmful, even accidentally harmful.
Mhm.
Obviously, like each person is different. There could be something that someone finds triggering or upsetting, but I wanted to make sure that at the very least, I tried my hardest to understand it since I don't have it and to make sure that um, there would not be anything that would be harmful either for other people who don't have it and who are reading it if they think like if they take that as fact. So I tried to be as factual as possible and make sure that everything that happened is within the realm of possibility, and then also make sure that someone who does have it reading it would feel like it was a good representation, and also not be harmed by it. So I did a lot of research, and part of another reason why I was interested in it was I don't know if you have ever experienced this, but have you ever had like a place in your dream that you dream about, like that only exists in your dream, or it could be based on a real place in real life, but that you're in a dream and you're like, oh yeah, I was in this place in my dream last week, or like or some people don't experience this at all. Some people have it to varying degrees. Some people have places that they've been visiting their entire lifetime. So in this book, the characters do have an inner world, which is like a house inside of their mind where they all live. And that's one of the things that leads people to say like, oh, this isn't real, like they're just making this up. But I feel like because I have had play like these kind of dream places, I feel like that's probably the same function that in a more extreme level would lead to people being able to have their own inner world, um, and populate that inner world.
Mhm.
That kind of first started me thinking about dissociative identity disorder in this way. And so all the research stuff was really interesting and it was fun for me to a certain extent. Like, there's a lot of not fun stuff since it's a disorder that's caused by trauma. But like just thinking about how the brain works and what it's capable of, and how people who have this disorder are able to kind of make it work, and live with it, and try to make it work is was super interesting to me.
Well, I want to get Melinda and Dondi involved in the conversation. Did you all have some questions for Alyssa?
I do. Because you do write across a lot of genres. I think I read before that you started off indie published, like you self-published a few books
Yeah.
before you actually were agented. And I was wondering how easy was that to switch from indie to traditional? And then how easy was it or how difficult was it to get an agent?
Um, so I technically am still a hybrid. So mostly because I've been fulfilling my traditional publishing contracts, I haven't really self-published anything in the last few years, but I technically still am a hybrid and still do publish indie and have plans for some indie books. So when I started out, I was um, published by some smaller at the same time as I was starting to self-publish, I was being published by ebook publishers, which are not as common anymore. That would only publish the ebook and maybe like a very small print run of the book. For my I had a romantic suspense and I had a sci-fi dystopian type post-apocalypse, but not like in a zombie kind of way. It's like cozy apocalypse because I was like, I don't really know what genre it is. But I also was starting to write historical fiction. And at that time, it was pretty difficult to publish historical fiction with Black authors. There was, of course, Beverly Jenkins, the Queen. I love her. Um, but
People
publishers,
compare you to her a lot. I don't know if you know that.
that is, one of the highest honors.
They do.
I love her, and like I'm happy to say that I'm friends with her. The first time I met her, I literally went mute and could not talk. I spent a whole
Oh, wow.
a whole evening. We went to dinner, and then she like just joined us at a conference. I was sitting across from her, literally just like Um, but now I can talk to her like a normal person. But she's amazing. But like one of the things that is so amazing about her is that like after just a few years in the publishing industry, I was like, I was like, this is so ridiculous and like putting up with all of, the nonsense about like who's going to read your book and not knowing how to market it. And she's been going strong for so long,
Mhm.
um, that it's incredible to think about like the things that must have been 1,000 times worse that she put up with, and that, Brenda Jackson, Rochelle Allers, and all the people who came out in the 90s who are still going somehow. Just must have like incredible willpower. But so she was there, she was going strong, but you could still sit and talk to a publisher and they would be like, well, there's no market for that. No one wants, and it's, you know, and I'd be like, don't you create the market? Like, what is your function? Um, but so like in addition to publishing my other things, I was self-publishing historical novellas and short stories. Um, and I think the interesting thing was being able to kind of write what I wanted in historical, and then eventually I was able to write to publish my, a historical series with a traditional publisher that did very well. But if you talk to publishers, they will still say, "Oh, there's not really a market for that." Um, More people are, obviously it wasn't just me and Beverly Jenkins. There's Piper Hughley, there's
Hmm.
Vanessa Riley, who I think had a book that came out today, A Gamble at Sunset.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, uh, several other authors, still not enough, but several other authors. And I think one of the benefits of being self-published was, even though I'm not like an expert at it, like some people really have the business brain and are able to see all the angles and like think about all the marketing, publicity, and getting their books out there. But it was also having an understanding of the back end of the process and being able to help market my trad pub books and also understand like where things weren't being done or what more could be done. Getting an agent was difficult at the beginning. I hope it's easier now for people, but I think it's one of those things that's always difficult for everybody. Um, And, there would be people who just immediate, because when I first went on submission, it was with a historical fiction set during the Civil War. And there were some people who were just like, I had an editor say to me, well, no one wants to read about the Civil War, or like, no one buys those books. And it's like, you haven't even read my book. You don't know what my book is about. Like, how do you,
Yeah,
like,
based
how are
on
you going
your
to say that
period.
just because it's set during a certain time period? Um, so getting an agent, I did eventually find an agent and she was great. I work with a different agent now, but I think the biggest thing that I tell people about getting an agent is that it's a relationship. In a way, it's like kind of like a marriage because you are working together. Your books together that you put out are your kids, because even if you switch agents, even if you move on, you are still going, that agent still has the connection to your books and
Right.
will
They
still be
still get
dealing.
paid.
Yeah, they still get paid and they still are responsible for certain things for your book. So it's like
Right.
having kids, even if you get divorced or break up, you're still going to be dealing with this person. So um there can be all of this pressure to just get an agent, but make sure you like the person.
Yes.
Make sure that
Yeah,
they
well,
actually,
that's like marrying people. Make sure you like the person, not just love them. You have to like them too.
yeah, make
Mhm.
sure you can talk to them.
Yes.
Um,
Communication.
and make sure that to the best of your ability that it's someone that if things do go differently and you're not going to work together anymore, that they're not going to be petty or like, trying to hurt your career, or and make sure that they, actually care about your career. Because there were some agents, I was lucky to work with an agent who actually did care about my career and not just the book that I was presenting to them, because sometimes some agents will just want to promote a specific book. But then if you have other things in the pipeline, they're like, oh, I don't really want to deal with that. Okay, I'm sorry, hold on for 1 second. The cat is doing something right now.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, and we're giving away 3 books. So I wanted to do
Yeah, we better do we
the
better do
trivia questions about
One of the
one of us
first
knows.
offers that I got from an agent was I
Okay, she didn't
had,
hear what I said.
okay,
Oh, we're getting toward the end, and we have 3
oh,
trivia questions that we're doing to give away the 3 books. And you've sent us the autograph plates that we can put in them. So, it would be great if we had more time, but let me do the trivia, and then we might be able to close out with whatever you were getting ready to tell us. So the first question is and anybody can answer this. It can be the 2 book clubs that are on or anybody online. Which of the headmates was only 4 years old? And one of us knows the name of the headmate or the personality that was only 4 years old. There's an answer for that. And then the second trivia, okay. Melinda answered it, even though she misspelled Kiki, but that is correct. So Melinda, you get you get a copy of the book, and you can answer either in the chat or in the comments online. The next trivia is, what was the name of the castle that controls that's central to the story in the book? The name of the castle. So the first person to answer that, Lydia did Kiki, but it's
Yeah, she did it
you
after Melinda.
after you did it after Melinda, and Melinda did it in the chat. So Lydia, the chat for the Zoom is separate from the comments. So she did answer first. I do want to let Lydia know that she wasn't, we're not dissing her. Okay. Nobody's answered this question yet. So, and the final one is, what is Ken's real name? Ken is the central character in the story. What is Ken's real name, full name, first and last? So, Alyssa, you in a final minute, you were getting ready to talk about someone that you had worked with.
Oh, no,
You're
it's
done.
done, but
Oh,
uh,
okay.
and does anyone have any other last question?
Yeah, we have 1 minute. 1 minute for any other questions, and have to be fast. And if you answer the question, the other two, we haven't gotten answers yet. But if you do, if it's after the show's gone off the air, then you can still win the book. You just have to DM us your address if you're not already in our system. If you won a book before, then you're in the system. So, well, Alyssa, since we're like 1 minute from it, okay, Melinda answered the second question, Grace. Yes, the name of the castle is Grace. So she answered that. And Dondi answered the Kenitria Nash, the last question. So that's it. All three of you won books. Lydia, Melinda said you can have her book. So we 3 books, 3 autographed books we're giving away. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for staying up or getting up with us all the way from France. And we appreciate you so much. And
And I
congratulations
appreciate you
on your
asking me to be
career and
here. Thank you
everything.
so much.
Thank you so much. And that's it for this week. We're signing off. And I'm Gwen Richardson saying good night.
And I'm
Good
Dr. Rhonda.
night.
Have a wonderful evening and a great week.